Hello and welcome back to the Alt. I'm your host Shapirian. Thank you again for joining me on this lovely Wednesday morning as it's time to finally start looking ahead to week 2. We've got a game tomorrow night and we'll talk more about it then. But I'm so excited because this week 2 landscape looks really good. I'm going to talk today about teams in particular that I think cannot afford to start 0-2. We talk every year about that dreaded 0-2 hole, what it does for your Super Bowl chances, what it does for your playoff chances. While it's not overcomable, it just kind of sets things in a weird spot that you just don't want to be in, ultimately speaking, not when you've worked all off-season for it. And that's going to be a lot of fun. You don't really want to see your team on this list, but if you're 0-1, you know there's a chance that you might start 0-2, and you don't want that to be the case. Also, for the first time on the show's very brief, infancy of its history, we're going to have a friend of the show on, my good friend Treads. He is also we talk about him all the time on Headaches and Hot Takes, my other podcast we do. We always refer to our good friend Treads. Good friend Treads is going to give on to give Treads takes. If you think I am even slightly competent at talking the NFL, you will love this guy. I love his takes. I think he thinks things through very eloquently and expresses them as such. I'm really excited to have him on the show. And then to wrap things up, we're going to have the UniTalk of the week today on Wednesday because I don't think having it on Friday makes a lot of sense. I wanted to squeak it in before week 1 because I knew the UniTalk look was going to happen a lot. But I think having it on Wednesday makes a lot more sense because we're not fully dived into week 2 yet. Friday, we really want to hear more about what's going to happen in week 2, get those predictions out there, those thoughts, and that's what we're going to do. So we'll end the show with that. But for now, once again, thank you for joining me. Let's get right into it. And I want to talk about 3 teams in particular that I think cannot afford to start 0-2. If you're 0-1, like I said, there's a chance you're on this list. Really, all 16 teams are going to do their best to avoid it. Obviously, some 0-1 teams play each other. Although a lot of 1-0 teams play each other this week. I guess that means that a lot of 0-1 teams play each other too. But it's weird. I don't feel like it normally works out like that. I feel like it's usually a pretty good spread of halfway undefeated versus undefeated, halfway 0-1 versus 0-1, or something along those lines. Like a third, and a third. A third undefeated versus undefeated, a third winless versus winless, a third 1-0 versus 0-1. That's not really the case this week. I didn't get the full number, but going further through these schedules, I was surprised at how it looked. Let's talk first with a team that impressed a lot of people this weekend, took a lot of people by surprise with how they went out there and fought, but not your boy. And if you've been listening to the pod, you know I really believe in this team. I still think they're going to win this division. I don't know how it's going to happen because the other teams in this division are really solid as well. But I'm talking about the Indianapolis Colts as a team that cannot start 0-2. Among other things, the thing that jumped out for me that said, boy, they really can't lose this one this week, is that they've got the Green Bay Packers sans Jordan Love. The offense runs through him. I mean, they tend to ebb and flow as he ebbs and flows based off of the 1 year and 1 game that we've seen from Jordan Love as the Packers starting quarterback. Now, we roll into week 2, and it's Malik Willis under center. That completely changes everything. And if we're talking about a team that I think can win their division, but really has to have a nice start to do so, they're one of them. And I think they're going to be a good second half team, and the schedule doesn't seem too tough at any particular point, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But of all the teams that I think have to win this week, they are maybe the biggest one that I look at and say, that division's not waiting around for them. Houston is out here to win a Super Bowl. I mean, can I just say that? And I know that doesn't sound like something we're super comfortable saying. I know we said it all off season, and so maybe we're a little more used to it. People are like, Houston, Super Bowl, Houston, Super Bowl. Stephon Diggs, Joe Mixon, Tank Dell, and CJ Stroud's amazing, and I get it. I'm very high on Houston, okay? And I do think they can win a Super Bowl. And with that said, Indianapolis has to be fully aware of that because it seems like the Texans definitely got the memo of, let's go do this thing. And we'll see how things progress. Obviously, they'll lose some. I just think Indianapolis is a team that cannot afford the risk of going down 2 full games back in the division early, with one of those being a division loss to the perceived favorite in the AFC South. So you've got Green Bay, you've got Malik Willis, you've got to take care of business. This early part of the schedule is really important. I think it's going to be like a November lull that we see from Indianapolis, if we do see one at all, more than it is going to be a December lull. I think December looks pretty good for them if they're playing okay football at the time and everyone's healthy. Again, everything I say about the teams going into the season and predictions about the teams going into the season is presuming that everyone's fully healthy, right? I'm not predicting the Ravens to go to the Super Bowl and predicting Lamar Jackson's going to miss half the season. Of course not. So with that said, assuming everyone's healthy around this time still and the Colts are playing meaningful football, I don't think the beginning or the end of their schedule is particularly tough. I think the toughest part for them is the middle of their schedule, which is just a bit strange. Like, you hear about the dreaded Decembers. You see these teams that have awful gauntlets to start the season. No, Indianapolis, they have a 3-game stretch of Buffalo, the Jets, and the Lions later on this year. And I think the Texans might be on either end of that. I can't remember which end it is that they have that second game against Houston. But that's going to be a big one as well. Maybe there's a game in there between Houston. So Houston, another team, and then those 3 games. But it's important that you're not rolling into the middle of the season, 3-4 or 2-5. I would even hazard a guess 500 going into a stretch of Buffalo, the Jets, and the Lions could be a fatal blow to the Colts, depending on how the rest of the AFC South is playing. And like I said, the division's not waiting around for them, so I think the Colts, you're at the top of the list, the first team I thought of and said, you have to win this week. And I think you're going to do it. We'll get a prediction out of the way early. You're going to take care of Green Bay this week. Come on now. Do the thing. Let's see more from Anthony Richardson, someone I'm really high on and want to see do really well. So with that said, let's move on to the second team that I think can afford to lose this week. It's one that nobody's really talking about in the sense of losing this week, and you'll see why in a second. The second team I think can afford to lose this week is the Baltimore Ravens. Who do they play? Oh, just the Las Vegas Raiders. One of the teams that everyone around the entire league is among the lowest on. Here's the thing, and by the way, I want to fully clarify from yesterday's episode. I talked about, is this a story? Is this not a story? What are we getting here? And we didn't get more info today from Lamar that was notable. I talked about how he missed practice. We didn't get a great reason why. It was implied that he'll be on the injury report. We did get more of an answer reported from, I want to say it was Ian Rappaport. It might have been someone else with the NFL Network. Apologies if I got that wrong. But regardless, we got answers. I think it might have been Mike Garafolo, actually. Regardless, he is sore. I implied that he might be sore. He ran the ball a lot. Took a lot of big hits. And on top of that, they framed Monday's practice coming off the mini-bye as a bonus practice. I find that totally valid. I think that's totally legitimate. A Monday full-on practice, assuming that's what it was, isn't super normal. So Lamar expected to play, expected to be in the building, expected to be present. You can forget any worries that are associated with that. I just thought it was worth mentioning beforehand. So with that said, they are my second team I don't think can lose this week when they play the Raiders. Their next 3 games, granted, we don't know how this next 3 is going to shake out and how it'll look when these games show up, look really tough. And yes, they look like great matchups overall because Baltimore is that tough. Again, that's my Super Bowl pick right there. I think they win it all this year. So they're not coming to fool anyone. No one's going to not expect to see them play well when they show up on the schedule. But say that something crazy happens, a trap game. Look at that Indianapolis game last year where the Ravens played terrible, it went to overtime, Tucker was missing kicks, and the Colts won the dang game as pretty massive underdogs, actually. I think it was like a pretty sizable underdog there, and they won outright in overtime. Say that game comes early in week 2 this year. All of a sudden, Baltimore's sitting here, you're 0-2, and your next 3 games are Dallas, Buffalo, and the Bengals at Cincinnati on the road. I can't talk. You can't lose this week, guys. You're looking at how this whole schedule looks for them, especially when the AFC has multiple teams with a more favorable schedule, and so many teams have it easier, and I think they need the division worse than some other teams do. I said that the Colts, I really want them to win the South, and I don't think the division's going to wait on them. The Colts almost got a wild card spot last year, and there's almost always an AFC North team there, period. But we're not talking about the Ravens in the same scope that we're referring to the Indianapolis Colts, a team that's hoping to be there. We're not referring to them in the same scope as the Texans. We're not talking about them in the sense of those AFC wildcard teams, the Browns of last year, the Steelers of last year, right? If the Bengals get their crap together, the Bengals of this year. We're talking about them in the conversations with the Chiefs and the 49ers. The guys that were like, you better be there in late January, people. We expect to see it, and we know you're capable of it, and there's no excuse for you not to be with those rosters. And I fully agree. Those teams, while it does happen that a wildcard team makes it all the way, they always win their divisions. You have to get a good start. An 0-2 team winning the AFC North is not unheard of. It happened just a couple of years ago. But 0-2 with this kind of schedule, where there's really no breaks and 3 tough games coming up, I don't foresee it happening. But if you're John Harbaugh and his Baltimore Ravens, I don't think you can afford for it to happen. So there's 2 of the 3 teams I think cannot start 0-2. Let's get the third team out of the way real quick. The last team, one of my adopted children, the Atlanta Falcons. That said, you have a much harder task than either of the other teams on this list, in my opinion, because you have to play the Philadelphia Eagles. Did I say Philadelphia right the first time around? You let me know if you listen at home and you hear me say it with the hick accent. I usually say Philadelphia. It sounds really funny. I think I said it right this time. Talking about the Falcons, I think we need to see Kirk play well before murmurs of panic start early into this Kirk tenure, where there's no chance they're going to bench him. Yes, I'll say that. There's no chance they're going to bench him, yet he still has to start playing well early. And on top of that, you look at how this schedule looks, it doesn't really look like it's the easiest schedule in the NFL for a few more weeks. I mean, the Steelers and the Eagles to start is tough, and there's a few more toughies before you start getting all those NFC South games and, the Broncos eventually and things like that. This is not going to be a cakewalk, nor is any NFL schedule entirely. Even the easiest schedule in the league is never going to be a cakewalk. It's what makes the NFL so great. So much competition on all levels. But that said, Atlanta, you're a big favorite. You're the undisputed offseason champs. You're the team that so many people believe in more than they did last year, and that I myself believe in to the nth degree. You're probably tired of me saying their names on the show already a week and a half into the show. And I don't blame you if so. If they lose this week, it's probably going to be a minute before you hear an extended segment revolving around the Atlanta Falcons, because I just don't know that they're going to be able to keep up. I think that this is a must-win game for them as much as it is any other team around the league this week. And I don't know that they're going to do it. I finally got around to watching that Falcons-Steelers game, and I don't want to bash anyone, and I don't want to act like I could do better than an NFL coaching staff, because I know that I couldn't walk in there this Sunday and do better than them, and I fully acknowledge that. With that out of the way, I really hated the way they looked all Sunday against the Steelers. I didn't like anything I saw, besides maybe Kyle Pitts' involvements in the offense. I didn't even love the way they used Bijan, and they still at least used him as the feature back. I'm scared for you. And this is a situation where you can't let the vibe get weird. I think of Philly. I think of Dallas. I think of the 2024 Cleveland Browns. Teams where you're like, things get weird there, they're cooked. That's always the case with Dallas. That really looks like the case with Philly and Cleveland this year. Atlanta's not a team you're thinking about, but if that happens, it could get nasty quick. So I'm not selling my stock yet, but they are a team that cannot afford to go 0-2 to start the season. Let me know at the Alt NFL on Twitter if you think there's a team I missed on this list. If you're like, hold on a minute, this team really can't afford to start 0-2. I'd love to hear from you. Or if there's a team that is on this list that you think can't afford to start 0-2, even if they don't want to, I'd love to hear from you. So with that said, and that segment out of the way, it's now time to have the first ever live guest on the show. As live as it can be, I guess. It's not a live show. It's taped ahead of time. But I'm excited to have him on. So let's go ahead and get my good friend Treads on here for Treads Takes. Treads, how are you doing, sir? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here. I love what you have started here with this Monday through Friday experiment that you're doing this season. I've loved this, first week, over a week now of the show. I applaud you for having very thorough and well thought out takes, even if some of them I don't quite agree with fully. Falcons. But we can talk about that some other time. But no, I'm thrilled to be here, and so thanks for having me on.
Sure thing. And the $50 is in your PayPal already, so thank you for the free plug and the nice praise. So yeah, I'll get that. It's in there. It should hit tomorrow. That being said, let's get right to the football talk because I need to pick your brain. I brought you on for one specific reason that I told you, and I told Herniator, and I've told the audience at this point, and that is I greatly respect your level-headed football opinions. So I'll pat you on the back for a second, but then throw you right into the fire because I need to know ahead of week 2 what team's performance in week 1 changed your mind the most in a positive way.
Yeah, so I think there are a couple honorable mentions here. I love the way Saquon looked with the Eagles. I think 2 NFC South teams, but the Saints and the Bucks look really good against, albeit lesser opponents. The Bucks are still my pick there, so maybe not surprising. And then I really thought the Vikings exceeded everyone's expectations, but Sam Darnold, I feel like, is a ticking time bomb, so I'm not going to go with that either. So my team that impressed me the most is actually a team that didn't look all that spectacular, but I will have to go ahead and own up that I was wrong, and I owe at least one man an apology. And that is a coach that you are very familiar with as a Michigan fan. Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers is going to be a problem for the NFL. I think even against the Raiders, who both of us are pretty low on this season, that team looks like a Harbaugh team. They were dominant on the trenches on both sides of the ball. They put the game away by running the ball, which when's the last time you can say that about a Chargers game?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, J.K. Dobbins, 10 carries, 135, I think, and a touchdown on the ground, which that's a feel-good story in and of itself with the couple early season-ending injuries he's had the past couple seasons. So you'd love to see that. I still have some. I don't think they're an immediate contender in the AFC this year, just because I just think they're probably 2 weapons away on offense to be a legit contender when you stack them up against the Chiefs or the Ravens. I'd love to see Herbert have a top tier tight end or just a perimeter weapon that you can kind of trust, but we know Herbert can take over a game if need be. And if that offensive line stays that good and they run the ball that consistently all season, they're going to be in every single game. And that defense,
Joe Alt,
every
man.
Game.
How did you let them get Joe Alt? He looked like the clear-cut best offensive lineman in the draft this year.
So this season, your goal, protect Herbert, let them grow, let them... And watching a couple post-game interviews, that team has bought in already to Harbaugh. They've bought in. I was
Worm is turning.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, but man, I was on board. I love Harbaugh. I love both Harbaughs actually, despite how different they are sometimes in some of their philosophies. But man, I thought we were going to be seeing this toward the end of the season, or at least that was my hope. But I did not expect week 1 to be that's a Jim Harbaugh team, and they are here. So they impressed me despite not looking, spectacular, but they did what I needed to see from them, and I'm excited to see more.
Yeah, I completely agree. I didn't give them enough love yet, and part of that is because I didn't get to catch that game. I actually just caught up on that game among a few others today. Trying to catch up with the million games on top of going to a game is kind of difficult. And I said early on, I don't want to talk about games I didn't watch, because I think people do that way too much, and I don't like that. And I will say, I completely agree that they looked impressive in the trenches, which is a total 180 from the Chargers' identity over the past few years. So I think that's a solid answer there.
They lost. I mean, look at the Raiders game last season, Thursday night. What was that, a 60-point game or something? They
it was
insane.
Such a mess.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen with a healthy Jim Harbaugh team. There's no way. They're not throwing the ball enough for that to happen.
Right.
On top of it.
Yeah.
So you better get ready to learn 13-10, baby, because that's Jim Harbaugh football. Okay, you're gonna see one of those this year.
The Chargers fans are due, honestly. So
they're long overdue.
Yeah.
On the total flip side of that, is there a team that started 0-1, like half the league unfortunately has to, that you look at and you say looking ahead to this team, there's no way they can afford to start 0-2 and still accomplish what they set out to do this year in particular. There's a lot of good candidates for this one.
Absolutely. And my first thought was that obviously like 0-2 is not necessarily a death sentence for anybody. But I started to look at these teams and one immediately jumped out to me as someone who needs to win this week, and they cannot be sitting at 0-2. So let me tell you, Shapirian, and all the listeners of the Alt NFL, about what I consider to be the streakiest team in the league over the past couple of seasons. The team down in Duval County, the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Duval.
So, oh my gosh, let's 2 years ago, the Jaguars, extremely streaky. I think they had a 5-game losing streak, 2022. Come back, win their last 5, I think 6 of their last 7, sneak into the playoffs at 9-8, have a legendary playoff game against the Chargers where they come back and win, and actually play decently well against the Chiefs in the divisional round before the fourth quarter kind of things got put away. And everyone thought they were on the up and up. Trevor Lawrence is here. Doug Peterson has his team ready to compete. They had high expectations last year, and I don't think anyone is giving them enough flack for the fall apart and the absolute collapse that happened last season.
And it was a collapse, too. It wasn't just, we kind of started to stink a little bit. They were the 1 seed.
All right, yeah. So I would look back. They were 8-3 heading into week 13 last season.
Yep.
And I wasn't sure if they were either the 1 seed or if they had won that game, they would break the tiebreaker for 1 seed. I don't remember exactly, but they were essentially the 1 seed in the AFC. Went into a home game on Monday Night Football against your Cincinnati Bengals, which, great game. Tremendous fun.
Yes, it was a great game.
It's honestly one of the Monday Night Football games from last season that I remember the most, which I didn't expect going into it.
No.
But how often can you say that a team that was sitting in the 1 seed in December, week 13, misses the playoffs?
Outright,
From
dude.
8-3.
Outright.
They finished 1-5 over the last 6 games. Finished 9-8, missed the playoffs. So that's extremely streaky again. That's 2 seasons in a row where they have a 5-game losing streak. And get this, the 1 game they've won since last November was against the Carolina Panthers. Everyone beats the Panthers. That doesn't even count.
The Panthers since last November.
I mean, yeah, everyone beats the Panthers. That game does not count. That's the only game you've won since last November. And I say this as I love the Jags.
Great.
I picked the Jags to make the playoffs this season, and I'm not necessarily backing off of that.
Ooh.
I still think they are, going to compete in the AFC South. But if they're going to, they have to prove me right starting this week. Now, they just lost a game against Miami, and no shame in that game. They played them very close. They led much of that game against a very good Miami team, which I'm high on. I know you're high on.
Absolutely.
But they have to bounce back, and here's why. So as I said, they're already extremely streaky. They have shown the last 2 seasons that they can just pull off a 5-game losing streak. And if they lose this week, they have the Browns at home. Very winnable game. The Browns didn't look outstanding. Good defense, but you have to win this game because if they lose, if the Jags start 0-2, I'm telling you right now, they're staring 0-5 in the face.
Maybe 0-6 if Caleb has his footing under him?
Yes. They go into Buffalo on Monday Night Football to play Josh Allen and the Bills. Then they go to Houston to play everyone's darling, the Houston Texans. Then they go back to Jacksonville to host the Indianapolis Colts, another team that just looks like they're going to be tremendous fun, if nothing else, to watch this season. Like, oh man, if you start 0-2, I think you start 0-5, honestly. And I know you could say, like, oh, they're going to play those games regardless of whether they win against the Browns, but you need the win now. You need to win, give your team that feeling of, okay, we've got our first win since last November, essentially. And, we can do this. We can play well. You have to get those guys a win. Because if not, it's going to get ugly really quick.
It's a fickle sport. I'm going to say it a million times this season. It is a fickle sport. And the bottom line is people aren't talking about it because the Texans do look like a team that could go 13-4 and win the Super Bowl. I've declared them as a team that could do that, even though I don't have them winning the division. So with that said, the AFC South is still a very open division. So I think the Jags are a great team to kind of wake up on in the off chance they do something. They lost all of the media darling perspectives. I remember last year people had them as the projected 1 seed before the season started. People all over ESPN, Florio, I think Chris Sims had him as the 1 seed last year going into the season. He didn't make the playoffs. even though you were the 1 seed in December. That's crazy.
They have to prove something. I mean, they have the pieces too. Like that pass that is circulated on Twitter that I've seen is tremendous pass that Lawrence threw to Brian Thomas there in the end zone. Beautiful touchdown pass. Trevor Lawrence is talented. They have, he has great chemistry with Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram. They drafted Brian Thomas. They brought in Gabe Davis to stretch the field. There's really no excuses at this point for that offense to, start the season with a losing streak. You can't do it. Can't afford it.
Well, I love to hear that because that's a team I've always enjoyed rooting for. And with that said, it sounds like I might have already got your answer to this question. If so, that's fine. You can elaborate further. But in case it's not, is there a team similar to my Atlanta Falcons and my Miami Dolphins that you've adopted for the 2024 season that you're putting your stake in the ground right now and saying, you know what, guys, no one believes in them nearly enough. I'm here to tell you why you should.
So first of all, caveat, I always kind of adopt the Dolphins because, my longtime best friend and your podcast co-host, the Herniator, that's his favorite team. It's my younger brother's favorite team. So I always root for those guys. And I'm high on them. I am a little nervous about the offensive line, but I kind of adopt them every season. So I'm right there with you with them. The other team, though, and I'm shocked to hear myself say this, I kind of was like, it's into my brain, like, this team, you're kind of rooting for them. I was like, no, I'm not. And I'm like, maybe I am. Oh, so I'm kind of scared to put this out there.
Don't say it.
Buying in.
Don't say it.
I'm buying into the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Tampa.
Can't do it. Can't do that. Can't do the division. I do.
Okay,
I like Tampa.
let me hear it.
Can't do it.
Let me hear it about Dallas.
And I know it's kind of a weird one because they've 3 straight seasons at 12-5. It's not kind of picking some like tremendous underdog, but man, they crap the bed in the playoffs every year. So this take really might not have any bearing at all until January because they're probably going to end up there if everyone stays healthy. But I just think it might be a season where they make some noise in the playoffs. Like they didn't really make any big splashes this offseason other than locking down their guys, Dak and CD. So not a lot of drama as far as like, is this guy going to get paid? Is that guy going to get paid? They have their guys. That defense is scary good if everyone stays healthy. That'll keep them in every single game. And then if Dak plays well, Zeke kind of looked okay coming back as long as they don't,
it kind of looked okay.
Yeah, it's
against
the
Browns.
best he looked in 2 years. So I don't know. I find myself, everyone hates on the Cowboys so much because the media gives them so much attention that it's, to me, almost went 180 to where it's like, I kind of feel bad for the Cowboys because they're almost, the hate now drowns out any even media attention to me. So
yeah,
I found myself like kind of rooting for them, and we'll see how it goes in the playoffs. But I'm kind of on board with the Cowboys this year. So shocked to hear myself say it, but there you go.
I think I have to say it too. I'm going to go out and actually take that a step further and say that while they're not my adopted team for this year, those seats are already taken. I kind of did a 180 on my personal feelings for them last year. I grew up despising them. They were one of my top 2 or 3 most hated teams in all of sports, admittedly. Now I have no stake in that game. There's no skin in that game for me. And I realized, God, man, no one deserves to go through what they've gone through. And it's not their fault the media covers them the way they do. They can't control the way the media covers them. And if anything, it is making them a ton of money. It is making them a desirable free agent spot. And so why would you not do the things that make you get covered like this? So I, for the first time ever, thought they might be a real Super Bowl contender last season. I've grown up and I've been undefeated saying they're not a real threat. They're not a real threat. They're fake. They're fraudulent, whatever. Last season, I said, actually, hold on a minute. This might be the year they do it. I'm confident in saying this is a team that can do it this year. That's why they made my tier of teams that could win the Super Bowl. I really think they could do it.
Kind of like you said about the Ravens, they're there every year. At some point, it feels like it's going to happen. But, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. So we'll keep that in mind as we watch. Who do the Cowboys have this week? I know they have the Ravens in week 3. Do you know who they have this week by chance?
Oh, off the top of my head, I don't remember.
No, I'm sure it's a primetime game. Oh, boy. New Orleans.
Ooh.
New Orleans at 1 o'clock, dude.
I don't know. The 1 o'clock New Orleans Saints are world beaters, apparently. So
nah, we're fading the Saints this week. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now. Very unprofessional of me. I'm sorry. I'm fading the Saints this week. Did you play a real team this weekend? With all due respect to you and the Carolina Surpers, but I don't think that last week really counts for anything more than an exhibition.
Might be a wake up call for sure.
That's an exhibition that just goes in the win column. Is really what last week was. That's what it looked like, anyways.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with that said, thank you for joining me today, sir. I greatly appreciate your time. I look forward to having you back next week. I'll leave you with one more thing that I want you to say, because I want to get someone else's skin in the game on this too. Putting you on the spot with this one. Give me your Super Bowl pick from the AFC and the NFC, and who you have winning it, even though you have a Week 1 head start, to say who you want in this particular scenario.
All right. As much as I hate to say it, give me the Chiefs in the AFC. I don't think anyone's going to dethrone them. I think they're going to be at the 1 seed. No one's winning in Kansas City. They're going to be there. The good news, they're losing the Super Bowl.
Oh.
NFC's taking it. Give me the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, we love the Lions. How could you not like the Lions?
Exactly. How could you not? And they didn't even play their best game the other night, and they still looked really good. So
I agree
I think
completely.
they can win a lot of ways, and I think the 3 games of the playoffs last year is a lot of good experience for that team, and I think they'll be more prepared this season, and I'm here for it all the way.
I couldn't agree more with that. I would love to see the Lions do it. I really want to see them do it last year with my boys not even making it to the big dance. That is who I wholeheartedly wanted to see do it. That collapse against San Francisco hurt my soul. And so it would be great to see him do it this year. So with that said, we'll keep that in mind. Cowboys adopted team. Lions are beating the Chiefs this year. We'll see how that goes. For now, thanks for joining us, sir. We'll see you back hopefully next week and make this kind of a weekly thing here on the Alt.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. A lot to linger on from those takes from Treads, and I think you can already get a feel for like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. He threw out some Jacksonville at us. He talked about some streaks from the past few years. I love everything that I just heard. I'm looking forward to having him back on. So with that said, let's get into what so far of this young show is probably my favorite segment of the week, because I love this kind of stuff. Let's get into the UniTalk of the week. This week, I think it's a lot more positive than it is me yelling at an entire concept that a lot of teams use. That being said, it's not going to be entirely positive because I'm framing the league in a positive light while focusing on the things that I really don't enjoy and have to kind of nitpick at. So bear with me, and maybe you just strongly disagree with some of these. You can let me know if I'm off base. But I think I'm making some good points here. Let's talk about the league's overall uniform health, the health of the NFL's uniform landscape. And if you're like, oh, brother, this guy really wasn't kidding. He's going to talk about the uniforms once a week, every week. Yes, and it's fun. It makes the league fun. It's what you see. It's so enjoyable. It's great to look at. It's what you identify with the teams. The uniforms matter, people. So let's get into it. The league has been served well, really, with an embracing of the throwback and alternate cultures in the past few years. The multi-shell rule, where you can see teams have multiple color helmets, has really helped with that. There's really only one big aspect that I think is holding back the overall health of the NFL landscape from being the best it's been since like the 80s right now. And that is a specific concept that is hard to name, so I just have to explain it. The concept is that there's a lot of teams right now, at least a handful, who have the worst uniforms they've ever had in their team's history. It's not to say you've always had stinkers. It's not to say you've always been an eyesore to look at. It's just to say that for some reason right now, out of your team's history of uniforms, this is the worst it's been in my opinion. And there's a lot of teams that fall into this group, but there's a few that I think bring the entire NFL's look down more than others. Let's start again with Atlanta. We'll be quick on this one. I just think everything about this uniform is tacky right now, particularly when those throwbacks are sitting in there. They definitely sell more merchandise. They definitely get more fan involvement. The fans definitely like them more. And you can't tell me, if you polled an average person to be like, hey, what looks better, the Atlanta Falcons home uniform or the Atlanta Falcons home throwback uniform, that more than 5% are taking the standard home uniform. So what are we doing here? The silver face masks make no sense. The larger Falcon logo on the helmets makes no sense. Everything to do with the gradient uniform makes no sense. Gradients are terrible. Terrible for uniforms. The font, no sense. The number font, alarm clocky like the Bucks to a lesser degree, makes no sense. And I will say that your last uniforms that you introduced in 2003 were at the time worse than your previous uniforms, and they still run circles around these. They also have a problem that I associate with the Patriots' current uniform group, which is I associate them with terrible football play. I just do. They're among the teams where you're going to look at me and maybe say like, what, so they should just go back to an old uniform? Yes, they should. You know why? Because teams have done it to success. On various degrees, by the way. The Jets went back to a uniform set from 2 uni sets previous from the 90s and the late 80s. And then you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who around the turn of the century say, let's get rid of, I can't even remember his name, whatever, Bucko Bruce, the Bucko Bruce creamsicle uniforms. Let's get rid of those and get something new. They win the Super Bowl, they have a tough defense, they establish a brand identity. Then they change to the Jameis Winston era alarm clock uniforms. And thank God, literally, thank you, that we did not have to see Tom Brady in these because the year he arrives, they have a modern, classic style uniform that is essentially just a tweaked version of their previous sets. The turn of the century, Derek Brooks, Rondé Barber, Warwick Dunn, and Mike Allstott uniforms. Those ones, Warren Sapp, I think I said Derek Brooks already. Those boys. It's just that. They went right back. They said, oops, sorry, whoop, let's back up a little bit, and they did that with just some modern tweaks. Atlanta needs to do that too. Just go back to your last ones if you have to. But even better, just go to your 80s uniforms and early 90s uniforms. They're better. They look really good. We would like to see them. One of the most egregious examples on this list is Tennessee Titans. You only have 2 true uniforms in team history, but the Oilers uniforms are sitting right there. And I'm not saying that a team is even going to entertain the idea of changing their brand identity to a former brand identity that is controversial at best as to the fact that it's associated with them. Maybe I'll save my opinion on that for another episode, but I have plenty to say about it. With that said, I don't think anyone was asking for a Tennessee Titans rebrand that ended up looking like the current uniform slate looks. Was anyone looking at them and saying, man, I really love the uniforms, but the helmet color is weird. It needs to be navy. No, I don't think so. There's plenty of navy helmets around the league. There's really not all that many white ones, especially at the time that they introduced theirs. And I just don't understand what anything they're doing is. That back helmet stripe that is made to look like a sword, it's tacky, it's terrible, it's 90s in a bad way. The shoulder stripes that look like a sword, the two-tone, the weird off-color swoosh because you have red in your uniforms but not really, you're red in your branding but not really, not good. I don't get why you would do this. If they were to do a modernized version of their previous uniforms, which I guarantee you, I haven't even seen them yet as the time of recording this. I'll find a mock-up and I'll throw it on the screen and be like, this is something they should consider. It would look so much better without even leaning into the Oilers branding that could get them in the bad graces of a lot of the league, depending on how they go about it in a tasteful or non-tasteful manner. Tennessee, I don't like your uniforms. I think they're the worst you've had of the 2 big uniform sets that you've had. This next one's maybe not fair, and I hate to pick on a team back-to-back weeks, but I have to for a second say Washington. Yes, not fair to say these are the worst uniforms you've ever had. It's the only uniforms they've ever had as the Washington Commanders. But you look at a team's uniform history, and this team used to matter in the NFL, people. This team, when your grandfather was growing up and your father was growing up, this team mattered. They had simple uniforms with an intricate helmet logo. That was the juxtaposition there, right? And they were classic, despite having 2 very vibrant colors that don't tend to go great together, in burgundy and gold. They looked great. Even in the 60s, with the gold helmet, with the R on it, that's the version of the uniforms I think they could get away with modernizing and using in their current uniform scape had they not chosen the Commanders as a name. I don't know how you militarize that uniform look. Could have had something done with it. Washington. Uniforms suck. They reek of an era that is being left in the dust. I wish you would do something to simplify them without going too full minimalistic. I don't know. Change your uniforms. The last one here is weird because this set of uniforms is going to be associated with success, at least for the brief future, the near future. That's the Los Angeles Rams. I just have really two major issues with their current uniform set. First of all, they used a lot of weird branding and corporate speak on it, and they have like the weird, like the energy, and this represents our passion, and that stuff kind of worked into their uniforms, and that stuff pisses me off, because it's all bull. If it's not a actually city-inspired uniform, it doesn't really matter, and I hate that stuff. So like, when they come out and they're like, we modified the ram horn to be like, the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, things of that nature. I'm like, who asked you to do that? It looks weird. There is sort of a cool 3D image that can be done to where you're like, oh, it's like a 3D look of it. It doesn't look that way most of the time, though. And I'm a uniform freak, so if you think the average person sees it like that, it looks like a 2D thing with a slit in it. Your uniform has an eyebrow slit in it, is what it has. And then on top of that, what did you do to your colors? It is a bright royal blue and a bright banana yellow when neither of those have been your two colors throughout your team's glorious history. A long history of a lot of success. More than anything, I think you were doing the right thing by embracing the past and wearing the Eric Dickerson era uniforms so often. You wore them in the Super Bowl where you decided not to score any points. That was cool. And you wore them for basically an entire season when teams were being really limited by the league at the time as to what they could wear uniform-wise with their throwbacks or not throwbacks and things of that nature. I liked what you were doing before, even though your helmet alternated whether or not you were at home or on the road, with the white horns for a second there, or if at home you wore pretty much the classic look. I don't even mind as much that you went with the full royal blue or the banana yellow, it's that you went with both. You completely diverted from your team's color scheme and made them both more obnoxious with very radical changes overall, and then changed your logo to just 2 letters with your weird gimmicky horn now. I don't get it. They're not as bad as other people on this list, but I think if you're looking at the Rams and you're looking at their uniform history, they are not guilty. Sorry, they are guilty. Just like these other teams, of having the worst uniforms in their team's history right now. And if a lot of these teams could just clean it up a little bit, tighten it up a little bit, a few tweaks here and there, and embrace the past while looking towards the future, as a lot of teams have done to success in recent years. Almost every team that's done it has been successful at it. The league's uniform health would be the best it's been in over 40 years. So with that said, let me know if you agree or disagree with any of the teams I kind of picked on there. I know it's a lot. It's a lot of UniTalk. It's a lot of fabrics and colors. But again, it's fun. It's part of what makes the league so great. And I'm really passionate about it. And I really enjoy talking uniforms this week. But with that said, that is all I have for you in this episode. So we'll wrap things up here. If you are watching on YouTube, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It really helps me out a lot. It helps me grow. And it helps me know that people are enjoying these episodes. Leave it a like as well. If you're on Spotify, Apple Pods, anywhere else, and you're enjoying the pod, leave a 5-star review. Otherwise, you can let me know your NFL takes at the Alt NFL on most social media platforms such as Twitter. But that is all I have for you in this episode. Thursday Night Football tomorrow. Bills Dolphins. Dolphins wearing aqua throwbacks. It's going to be fun. That one's going to be a good one. Can't wait to preview it. I will see you tomorrow.